Where else would you rather be? I'm Paul Clifford, CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association, and welcome to the People of Penn State. Each week on the podcast, you can expect to hear the voices of Penn Staters talking about what they're passionate about, and you can expect to feel the pride and the power of the Penn State Network. The People of Penn State podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Go ahead, subscribe, give us a rating. Ratings and reviews help others find these great stories. And we have another fantastic guest with us here today. His name is Joe Nadreau. He recently retired from Wells Fargo Advisors after nearly 24 years with the firm. In addition to his core responsibilities of driving corporate strategy and ongoing innovation, he was responsible for the firm's independent advisor businesses, Wells Fargo Advisors Financial Network, First Clearing, and the launch of the RIA model. He also led the digital and automated investing group. His group was responsible for continued evolution of the business platforms for the company's financial advisors and clients. Joe earned a dual bachelor's degree in finance and international business from Penn State and has an MBA from NYU's Stern School of Business. Joe, welcome to the People of Penn State.
Thanks, Paul. Great to be here.
Hey, let's start right at the very beginning. How did you become a Penn State Nittany Lion?
Sure, Paul. So like probably many folks listening to the podcast, I grew up in a very small town, very working class town in southern New Hampshire. I didn't have a lot of money growing up, and so I needed to get money, and I ended up getting a naval ROTC scholarship, which allowed me to basically choose any university that I wanted to attend. I looked then for some of the schools with the largest ROTC programs in the country. Penn State is one of those, and I made that selection just basically looking at a university that had what I wanted to do in school, which was finance, and had a great ROTC program. And I ended up choosing Penn State, and it was one of the best decisions of my life.
Yeah, I don't know if people realize this, but from an undergraduate military perspective, Penn State has the largest population of students that are in military preparation, ROTC, outside of the academies, which is pretty phenomenal when you think about it.
That's fantastic, and that's one of the drivers that made me choose Penn State.
Joe, why did you pick a landlocked state to be in the Navy ROTC?
That's a great question. And I went to basic training for the Navy in Indiana, so apparently they didn't think very highly of the ocean at that point.
Right. So beyond ROTC, what were you involved in at Penn State?
A bunch of things. I was obviously I was in the Greek system. I was a brother at Acacia, which was great. I still have some of my best friends in this world that were my fraternity brothers. I played a lot of intramural sports, football, softball, swimming, many things. It was great to get involved. I also joined, I was in the honors program at Penn State, which I got introduced to a lot of folks that, again, I'm still friends with today. And just my advice to any folks listening to the podcast is, get involved, because the networking, the alumni network at Penn State is second to none. And, throughout my career, I have leveraged that network time and time again.
Interesting. Another connection to the Alumni Association, Acacia, is also the fraternity of Penn State Alumni Association legend, John Black. So John may have been an advisor at some point.
He was indeed when I was in school.
That's amazing. Do you have any good John Black stories?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
So, Joe, you studied finance and international business at Penn State. What were your initial career goals after your service was complete?
Yeah, so for me, I knew that I wanted to be on Wall Street. I had this, utopian view of being on Wall Street and being a trader just from growing up. I was the first to attend college in my family, and so I didn't have a lot of folks that I could leverage and just understanding what was available to me. And so when I was at the point where I was looking for a job post my undergrad, the recruiting group at Penn State, the office that, would help you figure out what you wanted to do, was fantastic. I didn't know whether I wanted to go into consulting or directly to a Wall Street firm. I ended up choosing a Wall Street firm. I ended up going to Payne Weber, which is now UBS. It has been, that was where I met my mentor and, really the person who had some of the most impactful, meaningful impact to my career going forward, coming right out of undergrad. And I think that is a huge part of why I ended up becoming as successful as I was in my career.
This is the People of Penn State. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined by Joe Nadreau. He is the former Managing Director of Strategy and Innovation for Wells Fargo Advisors. Joe, I want to touch on that and stay there for just one more second about the power of the mentor-mentee relationship. A lot of people who advance far in their career can point to that one person who invested in them, who advised them, who guided them all along the way. And it sounds like you had that kind of relationship early on in your career.
That's exactly right. And, for those, listening to the podcast, when some of the younger people that have worked for me over the years have asked me my career advice, I think people tend to make, play checkers instead of chess with their career. And what I mean by that is, it's very appealing when you get an opportunity to take a new role that might offer you a little bit more money, may offer you a little bit more flexibility post-COVID, all of those things that are initially appealing. But I always ask people that I am mentoring, what exposure are you going to get to the people that can truly impact your career? Because I think that is what I mean by playing chess. You're not making a decision necessarily that is the next career decision that you will have to live for the rest of your life, but you're making a career decision in hopes that it will be the right decision in getting you exposure to the role after that. And, you have to think ahead. And what I think when I think about a mentor-mentee relationship, it's really trying to have somebody in your life, whether that is in your professional life, your personal life, that can help guide you and bounce ideas off of without reproach, without somebody, giving you judgment. And when you can find those people in your life and in your career, make sure you appreciate that and leverage it.
So, Joe, you graduated from Penn State. Walk us through your early career progression.
Yeah. So when I left Penn State, as I mentioned, I took a role with Payne Weber. I wanted to be in New York City. I lived in Hoboken, New Jersey, which back in the early 90s was just becoming kind of what it is today, which is a bedroom community of New York City. I commuted into the city. And my initial role with Payne Weber was that of an internal consultant. And what that gave me was the ability to see many different groups within Payne Weber and really learn the business inside and out, right? So I wasn't in a role that was very narrowly focused. I was in a role where every month or two, my daily life would change depending on the group that we were working with to improve processes, to change their workflows, et cetera. And so it really gave me a pretty good appreciation of the breadth of the financial services industry. And that had served me well because I was able to then, given all of that information from the work that I had done internally, give me an opportunity to decide what I wanted to do. From there, I actually left Payne Weber. It was a 2-year management training program with Payne Weber. I left there at the end of that program and took a role in sales and trading with Chemical Bank, which soon thereafter became Chase, which is now JP Morgan Chase. And I became a trader. At that point, that is when I started getting my MBA at night at NYU Stern School of Business. And, that really opened the door to me kind of understanding what else was available. And when I left New York University and I left Chase, I actually became a strategy consultant for the financial services industry. And again, the beauty of those decisions were that I wasn't in a role that was narrow. I was in a role that was extraordinarily broad, and depending on the client I was working for, gave me exposure to new and areas where I had not really had a lot of knowledge or experience. And it gave me that, and it allowed me to choose when I was finally ready to kind of commit to where I wanted to be. That's when I took a role with First Union Securities as the chief e-commerce officer for them, which was located in Charlotte, North Carolina. That's when I moved from New York to Charlotte, North Carolina. And then from there, I remained with First Union Securities and their predecessor firms, which later became Wachovia Securities, which later became Wells Fargo Advisors. And as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, I had been with them for 24 years, and I recently retired last month.
Excellent. Well, congratulations on that retirement. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute or two. What struck me about your career and the positions that you held within your career, in the span of your professional life, your industry transformed from using little to no technology to being fully mobile. How did you keep up, because you were on the technology side?
Yeah.
Let's start with that. How did you personally keep up?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Paul, because, when I joined at the beginning of my career at Payne Weber, we were still using Quotron terminals, where to get a quote, you had to leave your desk, go to a Quotron terminal to get a quote. And, from that point to now, now using AI to do predictive analytics, and the financial services firm, and really the entire world, has embraced technology and really modified and changed the way we view really everything, right? And so for me, becoming that chief e-commerce officer in 1999, when I joined that firm, it was just at the beginning of the revolution of online trading, right? That was one of the reasons why First Union Securities hired me, which was they were extraordinarily far behind in a movement that was allowing individuals to no longer have to go through their financial advisor and to be able to use technology to do just everyday stock trades, and do it at a very cheap price in comparison to what they were paying their advisors. And, the world at that point thought that the entire broker-dealer industry was going to revolutionize, and that would, change the very fabric of the financial advisor. And it did. And so the remainder of my 24-year career at what became Wells Fargo Advisors was really about technology revolutionizing the industry and us keeping up with those movements. And so, technology had a massive implication to not only my career, but really every day of every employee at the firm, and certainly every advisor who was advising clients in a very different way, post 1999.
Yeah. So just a follow-up question to that. I'm fascinated by what drives innovation, right? Was it your company driving to get better and better, or was there consumer demand, or maybe a little of both? What was the chief driver of the technology you were implementing?
I think it was, I certainly think it was a little of both. When I talked to I'm still very much engaged in the fintech world today. And, what I would tell you now is consumer demand is what drives that need for technology. They experience the capabilities outside of financial services and expect that to be, part of their daily lives with their advisors. So give it as a just an example, when COVID hit, I think everybody knew that, over time, the idea of video conferencing and Zooms would eventually revolutionize and change the way advisors communicated with their clients. But the pandemic really accelerated that. And so, we went from a world where, of our 15,000 advisors at Wells Fargo Advisors, maybe 100 of them were leveraging video conferencing capability in 2019. By 2021, virtually all of them had embraced the idea of being able to communicate with their clients via Zoom because they could no longer do it in person. And so the acceleration of that demand was strictly a result of the consumers saying, I want to not just be on the phone with you. If I can't be in person with you, I want to be able to use technology to have a more deliberate communication strategy with you via Zoom.
So I want to talk a little bit about your decision to retire. Sometimes people think when they use the word retirement that it's a slowing down. I'm not getting that sense from you. So kind of what's next in your career?
Yeah. So, the decision to retire was a difficult one for me, and one that, it didn't come lightly. For me, I had about 1,000 people working for me and about 2,000 independent contractors through our independent channels working for me. And over time, what happened, I had led all of the merger integrations for Wells Fargo Advisors. So when we purchased Prudential Securities or we purchased AG Edwards, I led those integrations. And as a result, I ended up becoming a little bit, for those of you who are old enough to understand the reference, the life serials Mikey of Wells Fargo Advisors. If it didn't fit somewhere, it really came to me, right? So as we were doing these integrations, if we got a new group, we were developing a new broker workstation, that team came to my world. If we were developing a new innovation lab, that came to my world. As we were developing new models like RIA, that came to my world. And so as we matured, we formed these centers of excellence, and much of my world was getting disseminated to those centers of excellence. And so, my choice was, hey, take a new role in this large firm, or because of my role over the past 24 years, I had a lot of connections into private equity, and I had a lot of connections into financial technology firms that were startups or just in the infancy of their development and growth. And I made the decision that I was going to leave Wells. I was going to retire, still have great connections there, but I was going to join the world of doing some consulting work for some of these fintech firms because I think they were doing some really innovative and industry changing work, right? And so for me, it became less about, how many people I could have report to me or anything like that. It became more about doing interesting and innovative things in the industry, because I think even though we have changed dramatically over the 24 years I was there from a technical perspective, I still think we're in the infancy of what we can do with the usage of data, the usage of AI, the usage of technology around planning to help consumers do a better job with their financial lives.
Yeah. Joe, talk a little bit about, the more we stretch with technology, right, the bigger concern or the bigger opportunity there is for gaps in security. And I know breaking into my Facebook is one thing. Breaking into my bank account or my investment account is completely another scenario. Talk a little bit about the measures that you all took to provide maximum security.
Yeah, cybersecurity and privacy in general was number one at Wells, and really has to be number one. So whenever I talk about innovation, there's this general underlying expectation that from an information security perspective, things are safe, right? It's to your point, Facebook versus your money are two very different things. What people don't know, every hour at Wells Fargo and every hour at every large financial institution, there are tens of thousands of attempts to hack their systems, right? And so, like the government or any sensitive area, we have to be better than the people trying to hack into our systems. And so, I would say, since I started in 1999, the percentage of funds around technology that are dedicated to cybersecurity continue to elevate and go up. Right. And I don't see that changing, because I don't think the bad people in the world are going to stop trying to hack into the financial services firms.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about service and how you give back to your community. I know that's very important to you. You've served as the chairman for the American Red Cross in St. Louis. What is it about the Red Cross or service in general that is important to you?
Yeah, so I'm actually involved in several nonprofits in St. Louis. I try to give back not only, it's easy to give money, it's harder to give time a lot of the time. And so what I try to do is make a commitment to, hey, how do I give back to our community? I got involved with the Red Cross because I ran corporate real estate at Wells Fargo Advisors, and we often did quarterly blood drives with the Red Cross. So I got to know the leadership there in St. Louis, and was very impressed with, between the blood services, the emergency disaster relief during all the hurricanes we seem to be having, all of what they do with veterans. A lot of people don't know how much they do for veterans and getting veterans home in time of need. And it's just a fantastic organization, and the leadership here in St. Louis has been strong and really great for the community. And so I got involved in that, but I've been involved in several areas with the United Way. Ran the United Way campaign at Wells Fargo Advisors for a number of years. And just, I always look for opportunities where I can give my time to a charity that I think is doing great in our community. And giving back to me is paramount and something everybody should be doing.
Joe, I want to jump back a little bit, and it's a question that I ask other leaders. It's probably selfish because I think about it a lot, but I think about the technology implementations that you've been involved in. I think about the integration from your system to the other systems that you were acquiring. And not only is there technical knowledge that's obviously required to be able to lead that, but there's also change management skills. So when you were responsible for some of those major conversions, talk about how you thought through the change and managing the change that was going on within the organization.
Paul, I think that's a fantastic question. Believe it or not, even though I've been responsible for the platforms at Wells Fargo for 20 years, I know very little about technology, right? I'm not a technologist by trade. I've had some really great people that have worked with me that do that, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Success of those integrations and success of any large transformation or any large implementation of anything is really about change management, right? And so what I always say to folks who are thinking about doing a merger and the integration that will follow, the comment that I make is success of that really comes with the first 60 to 90 days, where you're doing the target operating model and you're making decisions of what you're going to do, right? Because you could go to, if Wells Fargo Advisors and Wachovia Securities are coming together to form a single entity, you have to make decisions on who the leadership team is going to be. You have to make decisions on what technology stack you're going to go to. You have to make decisions on what product offerings, on what service levels you're going to do. But those decisions form the base of that large transformation. And to your point, it means that 15,000 advisors are going to have to learn new tools, and they're going to have to be educated on not only technically how to click on something and make it do something, but how to leverage that in their business development practices. And so I think people always underestimate the level of change management required. And I think people always underestimate the level of change that is going to be felt by the end users. And as a result, they underclub.
This is the People of Penn State. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined by Joe Nadreau. He is the former managing director of strategy and innovation at Wells Fargo Advisors. Joe, we like to have a little bit of fun at the end of each podcast where I just ask some quick hitter questions and you answer with the first thing that pops to mind. Are you down?
I'm ready, Paul. I'm ready.
All right. Your favorite class at Penn State?
My favorite class at Penn State was my introduction to finance class. That is what changed my whole trajectory. I was originally an engineer by trade going in, and I took a finance class, and I never looked back.
So if you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be and why?
Yeah, that's a good one. But, this one's not going to be terribly funny. But my father passed away back a little bit before Christmas. So I would definitely say my father. What I would say to the audience listening to this podcast, as a child, you always have all these questions that you want to ask your parents, and you think you have all the time in the world. You don't have all the time in the world. So have those conversations now, so you don't have to be on a podcast saying you wish you could have dinner with your parents.
Yeah. What is your most unusual "we are" moment? An unusual or unexpected place where you either yelled it to somebody or you heard it yelled to you?
Well, I tend to still, my son is just finished his freshman year at Penn State. And so there's obviously a lot of Penn State gear that floats around from both me and my son. And so I can tell you that I don't know if there's a particular moment, but there's really never been a time where I've worn a hat or a sweatshirt or a T-shirt that says Penn State where somebody didn't say "we are" walking by me. And that's truly a testament to the size of our alumni network and the passion of our alumni network, which is what makes Penn State so great.
Your favorite Penn State sport?
Oh, that's going to be football. Although I have a massive amount of reverence for the wrestling program at Penn State, just because of their sheer dominance over the years in that sport. But Penn State will always be near and dear to my heart, frankly, because it really brings out the best of the community of Penn State. I mean, there's nothing like tailgating at a home Penn State football game.
Absolutely. I think we've won a couple national championships in St. Louis in wrestling, and we're coming out there again. We're going to be in Kansas City for the NCAAs in 2024. So
always love it. And that's one of the benefits of being in St. Louis and having tickets to the Enterprise Center. So
absolutely. All right, here's a curveball for you.
Okay.
Ed Drew's or the Penn State Creamery?
There's no question. The Penn State Creamery. The peanut butter is what gave me my freshman 15.
All right. So peanut butter is the favorite flavor of Creamery ice cream.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. Well, Joe, hey, it's been wonderful having you on the People of Penn State. Thank you for allowing us to share your story with other Penn Staters.
Thank you, Paul. It's great to be here.
I also want to thank our producer today, John Petishnock, for all of his work behind the scenes. If you like this episode, I hope that you'll subscribe to the People of Penn State podcast in your favorite podcast app. And while you're there, go ahead and give us a rating, drop a review. Let us know what you think about the People of Penn State. Help us spread the word and share the podcast with fellow Penn Staters via your social media channels, and make sure that you tag the Penn State Alumni Association whenever you mention us. If you're a member of the Penn State Alumni Association, thank you so much for your support. If you're not yet a member, what are you waiting for? Go to our website at alumni.psu.edu, and you too can become a member of the world's largest alumni association. Thanks again for tuning in and for all you do for the university, for the glory, and for the future. We are